Hey everyone, it's Ashley Jones, Event Director at Marketing Showcase. Thanks for watching one of our recordings from Marketing Showcase Online. I really hope you enjoy it, and hopefully I'll see you at another one soon.
So I hope everyone can see that there. Somebody might just give me a quick nod if they can't, but really today's session is really practical. It's about, for those of you who are already creating video content in your companies, how can you improve the quality of what it is that you're producing? And hopefully for those who aren't yet doing it, but obviously you're here, so you're interested in it, that we can give you some pointers and some starting tips so that you can feel more confident about tackling your very first video and knowing where you should start, what you should do, and probably more importantly, what you should avoid doing, which is often, I think, very helpful. So I normally bang on for hours and hours and hours about these two topics. Who's your audience and what is your key message? Now, I don't want to go on about this too much today. A lot of my talks recently have really gone into this in detail, but I just always feel it's worth setting the groundworks, if you like, because for every single piece of video content that you are going to produce, you really need to have clarity on who that video is for. And the more clarity you can have, the more narrow your focus in a way, the more chances are that you're going to get really good engagement from that target audience, because the message will speak to them. They will see themselves. They will find the answers to the problems that they're trying to solve, and they will find value in what you're saying. So taking a moment, taking a beat to decide who that audience is and visualize them, picture them. Who are they? Who are you trying to reach? What do they already know about your company, about your product, about your service, about the topic that you're going to be discussing in the video? Really take the time to just drill down a little bit, get clarity on that, both for you and the rest of the people involved in this video, whether it's your colleagues creating it, whether it's the people on camera, whether it's perhaps the boss is going to sign off on it in the end. Make sure everyone's on the same page before you start, and that you have really crystal clear agreement on what your 3 or 4 key messages are for that one video. Do not try and put the whole kitchen sink and talk about every aspect of your business in one video. That isn't going to work. Right, I won't go on about that anymore. I'm going to take it as read and take it as a given. First thing you're going to do when you look at doing your video is you're going to script it out. Now, this does not need to be a novel. This does not need to be a 120-page Hollywood script. It can be some notes written on a napkin at lunch break. I don't care. The point is that you figure out exactly what it is you're trying to say, what is the language you're going to use. Because remember, that language is going to have to come across vocally, whoever is on screen or whatever voiceover you use. The same keywords and phrases and proper, what is the actual wording needs to be reflected in the accompanying text, whether that's subtitles on screen, whether it's the title of your video, whether that is the accompanying text that sits on the page around and helps the search engines find and categorize your videos. So scripting it out, and again, having clarity on the message and the keywords is really important, however formally or informally you do that. The first thing I would recommend is when you sit down to do a video, a lot of us default to maybe language that's quite marketing, maybe a little overly formal. We kind of maybe approach it more like we would a brochure or a web page, a landing page. It can be sometimes hard to loosen up and to be a bit more conversational. But actually, video, the power of video is in that direct human to human conversation. So trying to actually replicate that in your script and making sure that you keep the information conversational. So if you like, picture that audience, visualize who they are. Imagine you're sitting down having a cup of coffee with them and you're telling them what it is that you want to get across in this video. How would you describe it? What would you actually say? What are the words that you would use and the phrases, and how lighthearted and conversational can you make it? And just script that down and do a rough draft. You don't need to do it word for word for word. Just do a rough draft, the key phrases you want to use, and then just refine that. But keeping a conversation will help in terms of the way the audience actually absorb that information and how likely they are to continue engaging with it right to the very end. So that's the first point. Now, there's kind of 2 schools of thought. Well, there's more than 2, but there's 2 major schools of thought in how to use video in your marketing. And the first is the kind of a little more salesy, perhaps. It's you state it, you explain it, and then you repeat it. So almost in a sort of teachery fashion, you say what you're going to talk about, then you talk about it, and then you repeat it to make sure that everybody got the key points. So that's one tactic. Can be really effective, can work quite well in sort of shorter form video, I think. The second type then is more on the storytelling side. And obviously story, we've been hearing about this for so long, and it is so effective. And the reason it's so effective is because we can place ourselves in that person's shoes and we can relate to the story that is being told so that we can see how that impacts on us and what a difference that would make to our life. So I would suggest when you're doing your first script, maybe try both and see which you find reflects best on your company, on the particular video at hand. It might be that you use a combination. Some videos might do a little bit more of the stated, explained, repeated, and others you might like to do a little bit more on the storytelling side. Either way, what's really important is that you keep it short and succinct and you get to the point quickly. People don't have time, patience, or to be honest with you, they're not interested in hanging around waiting for some big reveal. They want to know, is this piece of video relevant to me? Am I going to spend 10 seconds even just watching the first little bit to see, is it relevant to me? You can't afford to lose them in that first 10 seconds. So get to the point quickly. And then they're interested, and then you can elaborate. Speak to your audience directly. Don't talk about third-party clients or audience or customers. Say you and your. Speak to them directly, engage with them directly. It's much, much more effective at cutting through the noise. And make sure that you include a persuasive call to action. A lot of the time, I think people the call to action gets lost in the video, and maybe there's a reluctance to be a little bit too salesy at the end of it. It doesn't have to be salesy, but you should be crystal clear what the next step is for them. Hopefully, you're giving them value in the video. You're sharing information, you're sharing expertise, you're sharing knowledge that they will find useful. And so make it easy for them to understand what the next step is. So whether that is, check out our blog or sign up for our webinar or join our mailing list or whatever it is, spell it out vocally through the language that's been used, visually and in text. So whether that's subtitles on screen or links or logins or again the surrounding page information, make sure you're giving it everywhere you can. Now, when you're new to scripting your videos, you might struggle to sort of figure out, well, how long? I mean, I want to do a kind of a 2-minute video about this topic. How long should that script be? So here's a really good rule of thumb. Like all rule of thumbs, it's there as a guide. It's there to help you get started. And then once you get into the hang of it, you can kind of play with it a little. So when you're speaking at kind of normal pace in a video, you should allow about 150 words for a 60-second video. So that's a good starting point. Now, some videos you're going to need to slow it down, particularly if what you're talking about is perhaps more complex. It might be around a complex, engineering process. It might be something medical and people need a little more time to absorb what they're hearing. It might be language that is a little more complex. So I would slow it down. So you're only going to be able to fit about 130 words into the same minute-long video. But if your video is really kind of fast and upbeat and punchy and driving music and everything, and you want to really get it squishing as much as you can, and the audience can kind of absorb that, then you can speed it up a bit and you can have up to 170 words. Again, rule of thumb, but it is a good guide. But remember, you need to give your audience time to absorb what you're saying. So if the person speaking on screen is just rattling it out, start to finish, from the minute you press play to the minute you stop, you haven't left your audience any headspace to absorb the messages that you're actually giving them. So remember to allow little breathers here and there, both for the person actually speaking and for your audience to stay with you and not to get lost in the message. And also things like the music that you're going to add is going to affect the mood and so on. We'll get into that in a little bit. So there's your script, some ideas to get started with. jot that stuff down, do a few drafts. It's not necessarily going to come together in one go, and make sure you run it off somebody who hasn't sort of been involved in the ideation of your video. So run it past somebody who is close to a potential audience member and see, does it make sense to them, or is there any major missing gap? Sometimes when we're talking about our own businesses, we know them so well that sometimes we leave out something really quite fundamental and serious and obvious when it is we're speaking to new audiences. Okay, so now we've got our script, and where are we actually going to do our filming? What locations work? What do you need to watch out for? Where can you do it? So, I mean, we've all gotten used to the Zoom world. We've all gotten better at tidying up our backgrounds and arranging our bookcase to look very impressive. Although I am still seeing some, bedrooms, and really, guys, at this day and age, it's done, it's over. Make sure whatever's behind you is not distracting your audience. Whatever room in the house you might be, whatever part of a building you might be in, the key thing is that whatever is behind you shouldn't be what is drawing your audience's attention away from the message that you're saying. So a solid color is a good way to start. And obviously that could be a solid wall. It could be a roll of paper you can buy, backdrop rolls of paper, loads of different colors. You can have different effects. You can have brick effect and all sorts of things. Relatively inexpensive. And if you're going to be shooting a lot of video in your office space, and maybe your office is, you don't have a lot of clear wall space, it might be worth investing. A roll of paper is probably going to cost in and around 50 or 60 pounds. And their rolls are really huge, so you're going to get months out of them. Obviously, as people use them, they get a bit grubby, so you're going to need to pull down the roll, cut it off and go again. It would be, if for any of you who haven't seen it before, it's kind of like what you would imagine a model standing on at a photo shoot, that kind of idea. But also backdrops that are appropriate. It doesn't have to be a plain background. Obviously, if you're filming something in an office environment and you can kind of see a big open plan office behind you, that's great, that looks lovely. The things to watch out for are what is visual in the frame. What can the audience see that maybe you don't want them to see? So for example, if there are, overflowing bins, if there are big exit signs or fire escapes, then you might want to change the location. So just be aware of the visual information that's being, transmitted to the audience, and make sure that it's appropriate. Declutter. Now, this doesn't mean that everything needs to disappear. And certainly, again, I think people have gotten an awful lot better at this with Zoom. We've gotten used to maybe having a plant, having, just, as I said, some good visual props behind you, but just don't have it messy. Don't have it distracting. That's the key thing. You don't want to distract your audience away from the key message you're trying to get across. So by all means, include some props. Wherever you are, depth of field is really important. So again, this is something that the professionals would use a lot of. If you're standing in front of, whether it's a paper wall or a solid color wall, or like a lovely green wall, a green planted wall like we have here, you don't want to be right up against it. You want to leave a couple of feet between you and whatever you're standing in front of, or your subject, whatever they are standing in front of, so that there is depth of field behind them. That's visually much more professional looking and much more visually sympathetic for the audience. So don't push them back against the wall or against a pop-up stand. Come out a few feet and make sure you've got depth of field. Indoors, natural light is obviously what you're aiming for. What you don't want is really harsh strip lights on top of somebody, or just really, really strong overhead lights, which are going to cause shadows down the face. If you can position someone so that the natural light from a window, or even if it's just a really bright open space, that is the ideal scenario. Then you don't have too many shadows to deal with. So just try and find a space, a position that allows for natural light, that isn't too cluttered. And obviously noise is going to be a second issue, but we're going to come to that in a minute. And depth of field, really, really important. Don't shove them up against a wall, keep them out from the wall. That's going to really make a lot of difference. Now, if you're filming outdoors, you've got some other concerns to deal with. And a lot of the time when you're starting off, my advice would be film indoors if you can, or certainly film any spoken elements, any interview pieces indoors, so that you don't have to deal with all the issues around filming outside sound. So obviously, it's going to be weather dependent. So if you are arranging filming and you've decided to do it outside, that's fine, but have a plan B, because you've got your team together, you've got the person who's happy to be interviewed, you've got your script done, and it's all ready to go, and you know when you're going to publish it and so on. And then it's pouring rain, it's absolutely a disaster, and you've no plan B. So always have a plan B. Don't leave it up to the elements to ruin your shoot. Some people might think that actually a lovely sunny day is perfect filming time, and it's not. An overcast day is actually much more helpful. A very sunny day, you're dealing with a lot of harsh, strong sunlight and deep, dark shadows. People are going to be squinting. The light in the middle of the day is at its strongest, and it's the hardest time. So, if, for example, if your subject is squinting and you turn them around so the sun is behind them, then they're going to be silhouetted. They're going to be backlit, and your audience won't be able to see them properly. So it's a harder environment to film in. So it's better to film on an overcast day, but obviously, if everything is lined up and the day happens to be quite sunny, you're going to have to roll with that. In that instance, filming earlier in the morning or mid to late afternoon is better than midday. So anytime from sort of 11 to 3, try and avoid if you can. That's when the sun is highest in the sky. It's going to be strongest. You're going to have more difficulty dealing with shadows and squinting and light and silhouettes and all that kind of jazz. So try and keep it indoors, for sound certainly. And if you're filming outside, try and keep it overcast or morning or late afternoon, early evening. Now, if you are filming outdoors, I would just say a microphone is essential. It's absolutely essential if you're filming pieces to camera outdoors. We are not even, especially us, we're all UK and Ireland based, probably the vast majority of us, we're well used to the wind. So much so that we don't actually even realise a day that we would say isn't particularly windy at all can still pick up a lot of wind on the mic. So by having a lavalier mic close to the person, you're going to minimize the impact of any wind whatsoever. But the other thing to be considerate of when you're filming outdoors is actually close your eyes and listen. What can you hear? We're so used to being in our own environments, our towns, our cities, our factories, our warehouses, wherever we are, that we tune out, we become deaf to the regular noises that we hear all around us. It could be machinery, it could be, printing machines, it could be forklifts, whatever environment you work in. If you're in a medical environment, there could be production lines going on or beeping, all sorts of things. And we tune it out. So when you're filming, you need to close your eyes and just listen to what sounds are around you and decide, actually, is it an acceptable level of background noise or do you need to move somewhere else? So bear that in mind. Okay, so we've our script done, we've decided where we're filming, and now we need to sort of set up our shots. So framing is a critical thing that you can do to make your videos instantly look a lot more professional. Now, if you're filming on your smartphone or a DSLR, you probably, if you go into settings, have the option to turn on the grid lines. So straight away do that. And those grid lines really help you to line up your shots to look as good as possible. And for any of you who don't know the rule of thirds, I'm sure loads of you will, the rule of thirds is a guide which suggests that the most pleasing way to frame up your shot is to have the central subject placed where the grid lines intersect. So in this instance, we can see this lady jumping for joy, and her head is at where the first 2 grid lines intersect on the right-hand side, and her body is all along that first 2 grid line intersections. So that is a very pleasing arrangement. So how would that work in kind of maybe more practical scenarios? We're not all frolicking along the beach in the Caribbean. So if we look at framing from an interview perspective, so the first image here on our smartphone, we've turned on the grid lines and you can see the lady here, and she has been placed to the left of the screen where the grid lines intersect. So we're leaving a nice long frame where just visually you can place more information if you're adding text and logos and things like that. But it's a pleasing way to frame the whole shot. The other thing to say about this is when you are framing something up, make sure the camera, I have this written down, of course. Rule of thirds. Okay, we just said that. Allow for plenty of headroom. Don't cut them off. So to do that, you must make sure that the the camera is kind of at eye level. So you're allowing headspace for them there within the shot. Keep the camera at eye line and keep their body facing into the shot. What you don't, let's say this lady at the top image here, if she had her body turned so that she was actually kind of facing out, leaving the shot, that's sort of disconcerting for the viewer. It looks like they're just about to walk off. So make sure the person's body is centered towards the shot and that their head is placed somewhere where the grid lines intersect. That is the ideal scenario. When you're doing interviews, make sure the person is looking at you, not looking down the barrel of the lens. Now, this is particularly important for interviews, for customer testimonials. If you're doing a direct piece to camera, like I am now, I'm looking down the barrel of the lens. That's absolutely fine. But if you're doing an interview piece, it's actually, it's more natural, it's more conversational if the person is looking at the interviewer and not directly down the barrel of the lens. And obviously the worst thing is if they go between the two, and that's a nightmare. So I would suggest, and this is what we do in our work, we'll set up the camera and I will position myself. My head will be at the same height as the camera, which should be at the eye line of the person being interviewed. And you keep them looking at you by nodding, by smiling, by engaging with them, making sure you keep eye contact and making sure that they're looking at you. And if they do start to look at the camera, just stop and start again, because in the edit, it's very difficult if they're looking between the two to actually get a nice smooth cut, if that's the case. So yeah, look at the camera, not at me. And the light should be falling onto your interviewee. Again, you can be backlit, no one's going to see you, it doesn't matter a damn. Just make sure that they're not backlit, that there aren't harsh shadows, there isn't strong lights directly above their face. So if you have a space that needs a little bit of brightening, place some lamps or shine some lights up behind them, and that'll kind of give a nice glow, but they won't be silhouetted. Okay, so we've set up our filming, we've decided indoors, outdoors, we've got our script, we're good to go. Audio. Audio is so important to think about, and something that is often a throwaway. It's not even really given any much thought at all. So I just want you to think about this when you're shooting your next video. Okay, interview pieces need to be crisp and clear. You pretty much, it's so difficult to fix poor quality interview audio in the edit process. So just do yourself a favor, get yourself some nice little mics. Lavalier mics are really not expensive at all. Rode mics, whatever you want to use, well worth the investment, because the quality of the interview pieces will be so much better. And why should somebody sit and give time to watch your video if they can't even hear what's going on? Forget about it, it's not happening. So make sure your interview pieces are nice and crisp and clear. Now, background noise and ambient noise. I know I said earlier on, if you're filming outdoors, that you need to be wary of this, and that's absolutely true. But there are also lots of instances where some ambient noise from your surroundings is lovely and appropriate and really adds a layer of sophistication to your video. And I'm thinking here of things like if you are in a production environment, and if you're talking about a new production process, a new product that your company is delivering, and you're seeing that going on in the background, it's perfectly fine to have some low-level audio of that production process, the machinery and all the rest of it, as long as the interview piece, the vocal piece, is very audible, clearly and crisply above that. So having a lower level audio of background noise is perfectly fine. If you're doing something that's an event based and you have a little muffled sort of audience sounds, clapping, people chatting, that's perfectly fine as long as the level still allows for the interview piece to be clearly heard. And then a third layer of audio is going to be your music, your soundtrack, and the mood of your video can be enormously impacted by the type of music that you choose. So in effect, I think this needs to be thought about when you're back at your scripting point, because are you going for something that's really fast, upbeat, vibrant? The music is obviously critical to achieving that feeling in your video. Or is it something more considered, slower, instrumental music, maybe classical music? Some videos have no music at all, and that can be quite effective, but I would suggest that's maybe at a more professional level, because you have to factor in a lot of editing and the sound has to be really perfect. So soundtracks are a great way to add mood and also maybe to cover up any little glitches that you might have made in the video. So pick your music early on. You don't have to have picked the exact track, but pick the type of music you want to use. What have you got in your head? And there's so many libraries of music to choose from now that really there's endless choice available to you. As I said, when you're outside, the things to be aware of are traffic, alarms, barking, or if you're filming indoors, it's hums from servers, from photocopiers, from, again, the regular indoor office noises that we have become inured to. So close your eyes, listen what's in your environment and be aware of it. For interview pieces, beware of jewelry, scarves, neckties. If you're clipping on a microphone and the person is shifting around a bit, or if they've got a scarf, you can easily get very, very muffled or scratchy noises. And again, almost impossible to edit them out completely. So just save yourself the trouble and make sure whoever is being interviewed, you ask them to remove the scarf, remove any jewelry that's clanking, and you have to do a sound check. Otherwise, how are you going to know? It mightn't look like it's moving terribly much, but if somebody's using their arms to gesticulate, it can be causing the tiniest little rub against the microphone. And if you haven't done a sound check or you're not listening, then you're not going to pick it up. And at the end of the day, when you're sitting down to edit your video, you're just going to cry because disaster, you have to start from scratch. Okay, B-roll. This is something that all professional videographers shoot lots of, and they shoot lots of it because it's what's going to make your video stick together. It's the glue that visually holds your video together and that actually sings and speaks and tells the story to your audience. Remember, we only take in what we hear, about 10%, whereas we remember about 80 to 90% of what we see. And if you're not filming enough B-roll content to actually tell your story and to keep people engaged and to have enough visually interesting material, then you're shooting yourself in the foot. Because none of us really like to sit down and watch a 3 or 4 minute video of just a talking head. There has to be something else going on as well. So B-roll is super important. Now, what's also important in shooting B-roll is shooting a mixture of footage. And I bang on about this all the time, especially for people who are new to creating video content. You have to be brave. And you have to get in nice and close and get those detailed close-up shots that are visually interesting. You can't film everything from the back of the room or from 10 feet away. It's going to be dull and it's just not going to be engaging enough. If you sit down today, anytime today, you're at lunch and you're scrolling through social channels, critically look at the next couple of videos that you watch and critically look at actually how many close-ups, how many wide shots, how many mid shots are they using, how are they putting them together, and actually look at it like you have to write a paper on it, and take that kind of critical eye and apply it to your next video, because it's that mixture of wide shots and mid shots and close-ups that is going to keep your audience engaged, and it's going to help you to really drive the story, because you're saying, look, we're in this space, this is our team, this is the kind of equipment that we can work with, and then you show we work with every client on their specific needs, and we show the drawings and we show how we get and then we talk about the craftsmanship and the detail that goes in, the time and the care and the love and blah 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 blah. Whatever the case is, whatever industry you're in, there are an endless amount of wide shots, mid shots, and close-ups that you could play with. But if you don't film them, you can't use them. So really, that is one of the most important things that you can do. And what I want to show you now is a very simple formula that you can follow to make sure you have enough of that B-roll footage. So it's called the 5-shot rule. It was developed by a New York TV cameraman called Michael Rosenblum, and he's been teaching this all over the world for years. And it's so effective because it's a great sort of 5-step rule that you can follow, and you can just, whatever you're filming, whatever the subject matter is, you can always follow this structure, and you're going to have enough B-roll to be able to use in your videos. So it starts with, you film the hands. You film the hands of the person who's speaking on camera. What are they actually doing? Just get some shots of their hands doing whatever that is. And then you film their face, not while they're doing their piece to camera or their interview. You actually film their face as they're working. Then you do an over-the-shoulder shot of them at their work. Then you do a wide shot, the context in which they're working. And then the last shot then can be kind of, it could be what they're working on. It could be, it depends really on the context for this. The last shot can vary an awful lot. But if you right now, this minute, think about the next video that you have planned or that you've been thinking about doing, how would you apply this 5-shot rule? And it's not good enough to do it once. I'm not suggesting that you just need 5 pieces of B-roll, not at all. But in every scenario that you're filming, follow this: hands, face, over the shoulder, wide shot, other shot. Move on, hands, face, over, and you're going to end up with a fantastic bank of B-roll content that you can pull and use, and it'll really help to drive that story forward. It'll keep your audience watching because they're not sure what's coming up next, and it'll really help you to engage with your audience. And the beauty of all of this short B-roll, own it, manage it, control it, and then you can repurpose it again and again in other videos. So it's really one of the most useful rules of thumb to follow when you're starting out. So that's it, whistle stop tour. Some ideas that hopefully you'll be able to put into practice very, very quickly when you're shooting your next video. And I'm happy to, oh my God, time flies. I'm happy to answer some of the questions that came up.
Hi everyone, thanks for watching another recording from Marketing Showcase Online. I hope you enjoyed it. Just to let you know, we've got all of the recordings uploaded to our brand new YouTube channel, so go over there and check it out if you want some more great content. We run these events once every month, free of charge, so head over to our website to grab tickets for next month's event. I look forward to seeing you there.